and welcome back to Ride Rescue. In this episode, I'm going to finish doing the rear quarter panel, get that prepped and welded in, and then start putting some of the filler on it. And then I'll hopefully get it back around to this side of the car, finish sanding and filling, and get both sides ready for primer. And hopefully I can get that door on the other side ready for primer and paint too. I have the inner fender well exposed and the drop panel out of the way. I also removed the inner fender well from the parts car. So that little problem area will just be trimmed off and welded in from the good one. A little trimming and a little welding and done. So I'm prepping this drop panel for where the trunk floor actually welds on. So I need to clean this edge all up. You can see how bad this is. It's got a lot of residue from sealant that they put in there. So I need to clean all that out, smooth it out, use a little tool and dolly. And this area here, I had to drill some pretty big holes to get all those spot welds out. And it's really left this piece a mess. But it's just a stretch. It's just a smooth, straight piece of metal. So I'm just going to weld in a new piece rather than try to weld in those holes. Now that I have access to the back side of this quarter panel, I'm going to contour these lines back the way that should have been before it was bumped. You can see where the prior repair had been done. It actually looks like it's pretty good along there, but right in this area, fortunately I can see the original stamping mark, so I should be able to just tap that out. I've got a spot here where they drilled through and pulled it with a slide hammer. They've actually pulled that out too far. I've got a little bit of a spot on each side that's too low, so I'll flip it over and tap that around a little bit, and then I'm going to have to grind out all that filler on the other side. So I am ready for the initial test fit. I know I have a lot of overlap in areas where I need to be able to adjust to. So for the most part, one of the areas I wasn't really sure about was where this was actually cut to, and it looks like it was just cut right along that edge. So if I just really snug that up, because you can see by this hole that it needs to be bumped that way about 1/8 of an inch, and that's about how much that is. So I might have to trim a little bit of this off by the time I do a knife cut on there too. But if I remember right, this had a fairly big gap. Some of that gap could be taken up with adjustment, but I've got a decent gap there too. So I could open up that edge, just leave a sliver, and then tap it over and close up that wide door gap. So that's something to think about too. And then when it comes to the bottom, I still need to figure out exactly where I'm going to cut that. It fits up nicely to the drop panel at the trunk where that little patch was put on, so that's good. And then the tail end here, there were so many contours and so many shapes, I decided to leave the factory tail light area and then just trim this off. And I'll probably leave it about right there. I like where this is all lined up, so I might end up playing around with this area, but for the most part I'm happy with where it is. And once I get it lined up at the door, and I'll start tacking that in, and then I can do a slice cut all the way through both panels along here, and then there'll be a perfect alignment fit. Made a lot of progress today. It's looking really good. You can see some waves right there. I need to smoothen that out before I put the panel on. But I did a lot of work right here to this lip. That lip was a mess. I feel really good about it now. We're just a skim coat. We'll fix that, and then those holes that were drilled. I still need to grind out all that material. There's a fair amount of filler in there is what it looks like. It feels pretty thick, so I'll grind it all out, smooth it, and then I can clean up the edges, and this is ready to be tacked in. Now that I have this panel fitted, I just want to kind of rough out some more areas. I want to start at this edge and move back. And I roughed this out pretty good from the back side. It feels really close. I can do a little bit more, but I want to get this filler out so I can see how much more I need to do to the back side of this. So I'm going to try my heavy wire wheel and see if I can get that out really quick. One thing that's really nice about using a wire wheel like this is it doesn't get the panel anywhere near as hot as it would with a grinder. It makes pretty quick use of getting all that material out. As you can see, it leaves the metal pretty clean. Now that I've gotten this stripped down, I can feel it. It's actually pretty smooth. It's not as bad as I thought. I'll need to go through and clean up these holes on the backside too, so I can weld them all in and cover up those spots that they drilled for their slide hammer. But I quickly got rid of all the filler and the paint. Now I can start cleaning up these edges. Now that I have the original red quarter panel trimmed back, and I have this panel up against it, this panel was cut along that body line, and it fits up perfectly at the top and at the bottom. But this area here, where I was worried about the big gap, it has been pushed over. So when this got bumped and scraped, it did move that body line back right there. So I'm going to have to push it over. There is a brace here, and it looks like it's pretty close at the brace. So hopefully I'll be able to just bump that over and get that gap closed back up, and then have a nice even line there to weld to. Well, that's all it took. Looks like that's lined up really well now. I'm not getting a perfect alignment across my bolt holes, so I do need to just ever so lightly trim off and open up this weld. Right now it's butted, and there's probably about a 1/16 of an inch there more that I could go, but I'm going to actually trim it off the gray rather than trim it off the red. By overlapping these panels and then cutting it all the way through with a cutting wheel, I'm able to get perfect alignment. And then by just going around and doing some light tacking, if things aren't lined up exactly, I can just go back to the grinder and cut through those little tack welds. I've tacked a few spots across the top just to hold it all in place. And now I'll go down along this edge and I'll line it up and tack all along that edge. Now that I have it all tacked all along the top and all across the bottom, before I start tacking in around the wheel well and the trunk drop off, I want to make sure the car is setting level. Right now I have it on jack stands more towards the center of the car which could give it a little bit of sag. I don't want to end up having a saggy rear. It's not likely, but there's potential. So I want to get the weight on the axle, on the springs, so the natural bend and twist of the frame is leveled up as much as possible. And the trunk, along the drop-off panel where the drop panel and the trunk floor meet, you can drive some screws through it, some sheet metal screws. I have a couple of little clamps that I can put along the edge that I can move along as I weld over those spots. That'll hold it in place while I get everything else aligned. As for the lip around the wheel well, you can just use vice grips and clamp it, weld through those drilled out spot holes. And I'll be able to tack a few spots along here. I've got everything tacked in, miscellaneous spots, just enough where everything is perfectly lined up. I'm really happy with how it came along. I still have this seam around along the bottom here. I've got a little bit of an area here I'm going to have to open up with the grinder. But I'll just use my screwdriver to kind of align this and tack it in a couple of spots along here, and then I'll be able to open that up and grind that down. Before I get too ahead of myself, making sure all these door gaps and everything work, since this door is so mangled, it doesn't make sense to repair it since I have a really good parts car door. That would be that door. It just has poor paint, but it's solid, no rust. I stole the wing window out of it, so I'm going to have to put it all back. But in order to paint it right, I'm going to completely strip it down. And then I'll paint it to match the car, and I might as well get the door out of the way now so I can patch that little teeny spot on the rocker panel. Now that I have the door out of the way, I can start seeing how strong this is. It looks like that rocker panel is weaker than I thought. It's nowhere near as bad as the other side. Most of it's solid metal, but right along that top edge, right along in here, I just kept tapping on it with the screwdriver. Kept poking through, so I got to come down a ways, but it's not too bad. And then I have the panel that I cut off of the parts car again. I'll be able to splice that in pretty easy. It's amazing how much dirt I was able to get up inside of that. Some of this is rust from the inside of the panel, but that's a lot of sand. There's an access hole for this bolt that holds the fender on, and the dirt is able to just kick up inside of there, so it's no wonder these rust out like they do, especially in salty roads. Instead of grinding all the paint off and cleaning up the back side of the metal and cutting it, I just grabbed a sheet of new metal. I used the piece that I cut out as a template, and then I just tapped the back side of it to give it a little bit of a contour, since it had a little bit of a bow to the body. I just need to grab a magnet and I'll burn it in. I've got everything ground down smooth. Just need to scuff up around these areas where I need to put filler. I like to have a good bite for the filler to go into. Right now I sanded all this with 320 just to smooth it all out. So I'll go back with an 80 grit sandpaper and just really scuff it up. Where there's a straight line, shadows and light will lead your eye to that straight line. If there's anything that's a wave or a dent, it's going to show up. But as you get into contours like this, you really can't use the straight edge. So you just have to do it all by hand and get a feel for it. It's almost like being a sculptor. And sculpting those body lines, and contouring and shaping them, and making sure that you don't always go in the same direction so that you don't end up with ridges and waves. But it looks good, it feels good. I just need to finish this area up, and it's pretty well hidden, but I still want to do it nice. There was a dent here that I straightened out. But filling across it, I didn't notice there was a high spot here. So rather than filling this more, I got to tap that down, and then I'll have to put another skim coat on it. So as I move across this panel, I'm really happy with how this turned out. I've got a little bit of a spot right here. I've got a little bit of a low spot. Now I've got a little bit of a spot here that I've got to contend with. So to remind myself as I'm moving across what I need to fill, I just put a little dab. I mean, some of these are pretty obvious, but this one's not, and I don't want to forget it. I'd hate to get all the primer on here and then block down the primer and then find out I need to put a little more filler on there. So now's a good time to make notes as I move across. So this should be flat and smooth and contoured all the way down this panel, and then transition into that. So by using a longboard, I can work that fender lip and make sure to keep it flat, and then as I get to the point where I can finally start seeing metal through it, then I'll know when I've gone far enough. I'm just starting to see a little bit of metal on these edges. This line was really wavy. It didn't look like it had any severe damage or anything over the years, but I think between getting bumped here made it a little bit low, had a little bit of a drag mark here and a pretty major drag mark along right here. So it just kind of left this line a little goofy. So by just putting a thin coat along there and then using a longboard along that line, I'll be able to make that just crisp and straight, and your eye will be able to look down it and see that's the way it was intended from the factory. Now that I've been longboarding this line, you can start to see metal here, and metal here, and metal here. So just like I suspected, I've got some waves going on in here. Had I have been using a small sand block like this, I would have been able to smoothen that out and not really notice these two low spots. So would it have been okay depending on the color of the car, depending on the light? Yeah, but here's a chance you're getting in the right light at a car show. Somebody looks down and goes, oh, that's a shame, it's got waves in it. So by taking a longboard, you can guarantee then that this is going to be straight and flat the way it should be. Is this a show car? No. But can it be? Absolutely. So why not take that extra step and just really smooth out and make these panels perfect. I'm really excited about how this turned out. I was worried that's a big flat area there with that long crease in it. It was actually a couple of creases. So really pleased only one coat on that. I've got a couple of spots where I've got a little bit of a low spot. Just hit a little glazing putty on those. When it comes to a contour like this, you can't really use a long board. So you just have to go with a smaller piece like this and then kind of work that curve. It kind of goes back to being the sculptor again, where you just have to have an eye and a feel for it. Keep crisscrossing and you won't end up with any grooves. I'm starting to see a little bit of metal and a little bit of metal and a little bit of metal, so I've got it right where I want it. Really excited. I did pretty good on the first coat. I thought I was just going to rough it out and then have to do a lot more of a second coat, but it ended up being just a few minor low spots. So you can see in the dark green, that's where I just touched up all the little low spots. I'm confident now that just one last sanding and this is ready for primer. This little trim area recess is perfect for a wooden dowel, and then you just work into that groove. I just wipe this in with my finger, and once I hit metal along this edge, then I can just go back and finish working that with a little piece of paper. And it's finished. For the inside of the fender well lip, I just used a rubber glove and just spread a smooth, even coat of filler across it, and then I'll just sand it by hand. It's not going to be perfect, but I don't want it to be perfect. I want it to be lumpy and have high and low spots, and then show what would appear to be spot welds. So these from the factory, these are not perfect, they're lumpy. So by just putting a coat of filler on there and then sanding it smooth, it'll have that same look. Well, I am finally finished getting all of this roughed in and smoothed out. Now it is ready for primer. Pretty amazing. It was a lot of work, but it was way less work than trying to repair the original fender that was on here. So it's pretty good. Pretty nice to be able to have that fender from a donor car. It's amazing that it had been sitting for so long, wrecked in the mid-70s, and then just sitting, waiting for one day that would actually donate its parts for this car. Like I say, I've got to get it in primer, then I'll sand it all down smooth and paint it. It's kind of a shame to not just paint the whole car at this point. I've got it completely apart so that I didn't start it on fire with all the welding, and I wanted to be able to check the floors. The floors are amazing. So now it's just a matter of working on the door, and as you can see, I've got a big mess to clean up. So I'll get everything organized, get everything cleaned up, get the car moved around for primer, and then I can get this door all smoothed and paint it too. Well, thanks again for watching my videos. I'll be looking for another project now that this one's moving on to a new home. Appreciate you watching. Give me a like, share with your friends, subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate any comments you might leave me. I love hearing from you. So thanks again for watching. Bye for now.